SLOTLT's Legend of the Lost Treasure is a Thomas the Tank Engine movie released for the franchise's 70th anniversary in 2015. It was a great movie, loved by fans and critics, with big names such as John Hurt, Eddie Redmayne and Olivia Colman joining the cast for the movie. Most people who have seen the movie can agree it is one of, if not the, best Thomas movie ever made. Everything is perfect, from the introduction of classic characters, the voice acting, the stakes and the score. Well, almost perfect. A big issue people have with the film is its two biggest characters, Thomas and the Fat Controller. People say Thomas lies too much. They say the Fat Controller is too strict, and that both of these things make them both very out of character. And while I will go on and explain why I think the movie makes cases for why both characters act this way, it got me thinking, was there anything else that could support it? The season that aired just before SLOTLT's Legend of the Lost Treasure was season 19. And so I took a look back at it and I found something. An episode that explains perfectly why both characters act the way they do here. Who's Jeffrey? In Who's Jeffrey, Thomas causes an accident at the docks, and in his panic to not get in trouble, lies. He claims an engine called Jeffrey did it, an engine that doesn't exist. The lie gets out of control when the Fat Controller wants to meet him, and ends with Thomas being forced to come clean. The important thing to remember here, however, is that Thomas doesn't choose to come clean, but rather is forced when Spencer is about to crash into him. The Fat Controller tries to teach Thomas a lesson by telling him about how he broke his wife's teapot. Thomas, however, is clearly not engaging with it. Look.
We all have accidents. Why, only this morning I smashed Lady Hat's favourite teapot. And do you know what I did?
You told her Jeffrey had done it?
No! I owned up. And you should have owned up too.
And notice how Thomas is constantly looking away? Even when caught, he doesn't want to learn from it. Also notice how angry the Fat Controller is. Thomas says sorry, but has no form of punishment. The Fat Controller says he hopes Thomas can learn from his mistake this time. This line shows he knows Thomas has lied to him before, and he sounds very upset. Hopefully you're starting to see the links between this episode and SLOTLT's Legend of the Lost Treasure, the Fat Controller's growing frustrations, and Thomas not learning his lesson. A quick aside before I get into this section of the video, but I was only able to find a US copy of the movie, so I'll be using clips from that throughout this video, despite it not being my preferred version to use.
No coaches to pull.
In SLOTLT's Legend of the Lost Treasure, Thomas is shown from the start to have grown arrogant. He races when he knows the Fat Controller doesn't approve. He says he's always going to be the Fat Controller's #1 engine. The Thomas in this movie is one that has been let off the hook for too long. He sees himself as untouchable. That's why when he's annoyed with having to shunt Gordon's coaches, he tries to run off with them, which leads into a crash. Something a lot of people don't seem to notice is just how big a crash Thomas causes. He blocks 4 main lines into Knapford Station by derailing big, expensive express coaches, not only delaying the express, but many other trains as well. The Fat Controller is already in a bad mood when he finds out, and it makes matters worse when Thomas lies to him repeatedly despite others already knowing what happened. He blames Gordon and Emily, and just as he's about to blame Toby, the Fat Controller snaps at him. Remember, this would be bad enough without knowing the context of Who's Jeffrey. Well, we know the Fat Controller wants Thomas to stop lying. Even as the Fat Controller tells him it's his fault, Thomas denies it. Things are only made worse when Ryan arrives, and as Thomas has Ryan's job as punishment, the Fat Controller gives Thomas's branch line to Ryan temporarily. When we next see Thomas, he's complaining to the small engines that the Fat Controller has taken his branch line away, again shifting the blame from himself onto someone else. When asked why he would do such a thing, Thomas blames Gordon. Thomas can't accept he's the one at fault here due to his arrogance we saw at the start of the film. Thomas's crash into the caves is again caused by his arrogance. He wants to prove he's the best, so he takes the veils when he's not meant to, and doesn't stop when he's warned of the danger, as he presumed everyone was just happy to see him. Ironically, in this movie, Thomas sees himself as the main character, the only one that matters. When he's lifted out, he lies again, saying no one warned him. At this point, the Fat Controller's fed up of Thomas and even says as much. He isn't being out of character here, or being strict. He's a man who's trying to build a new branch line, while his engine is lying to his face and making excuses all the time. Again made worse by how we know from Who's Jeffrey, that he's tried to be nice and teach Thomas about lying, but he knows that approach doesn't work. The next issue people have with Thomas is how he treats Ryan. Ryan gets fleshed out later in later seasons, but in this movie he's just a nice engine with nothing really wrong with him. Thomas has a dislike for him and treats him poorly. Leaked information from the toys of the time showed that at one point, late into SLOTLT's Legend of the Lost Treasure's development, Ryan was set to be a villain, and that's the engine for Thomas to overcome. Some would say Thomas disliking Ryan is just left over from that scrapped plot point, but I would disagree. I think that's probably got something to do with it, but I think there's a deeper reason. All through this movie, we see Thomas push the blame onto others, and we know from the great discovery that Thomas has a fear of being replaced on his branch line by other tank engine. The reason Thomas dislikes Ryan is that all his issues started getting brought up by the Fat Controller when Ryan arrived. To Thomas, Ryan embodies everything wrong with his life right now. In a way, Ryan is also an intimidating Thomas. Not intentionally, of course, but he's everything Thomas sees himself as. A good, hard-working engine. While Thomas wants to be good, his arrogance and cheekiness hold him back. Because of this, he blames all his issues on Ryan. That's why Thomas lets Ryan take the bad coal, which of course is the reason the dynamite gets lit in the chase. When Thomas tries to get rid of the dynamite in the chase, the Fat Controller sees him and blames him. Now, this is the scene most people take issue with, but I don't. The Fat Controller is sick of Thomas's lies. As he says, sending Thomas to the new branch line was meant to be a punishment to teach Thomas a lesson, but instead every time he sees Thomas, he keeps causing trouble. Thomas lies here again, saying it's not his fault, when it was because of the bad coal he gave Ryan. People often bring up the fact that the pack or Marion should have stood up for Thomas in this moment, but you have to remember here that the Fat Controller was in a really bad mood and told them all to get back to work. It's like when you're a kid and you see your friend getting in trouble from their parents and you don't want to get involved in case you get in trouble as well. At the end of the movie, once Thomas has chased Sailor John and he's being lifted from the water, he sees the Fat Controller, and for the first time he says sorry. He takes responsibility for his actions, but the Fat Controller stops him and praises him. Some have questioned why the Fat Controller has such a quick turnaround from being angry, but it's simple. Not only did he hear about Thomas trying to save the treasure, but he saw Thomas in the moment taking responsibility. In that moment he knew Thomas had learned his lesson. He was no longer lying to save himself, something he'd been doing since he was Jeffrey all that time ago. As I said before, I feel SLOTLT's Legend of the Lost Treasure gives a really good job of trying to explain this, but with the context of who's Jeffrey, it gives that extra understanding that maybe helps some people see where the Fat Controller acted the way he did. And I'm afraid that's where I'll have to leave you. You see, this episode had to be short as I am actually upgrading to a new laptop which should be able to run trains. And today is the night before it arrives when I'm recording this. So next time I see you, hopefully it'll be with something to do with trains. Till next time, please click the card here to go and see an audiobook about my OC.